Faithful servant. Breakfast at Wayne Manor was served at 6 p.m. and traditionally consisted of an egg white omelet, a pot of black coffee, and a pair of mild painkillers served on a small silver dish to the side of the tray. Lately, Master Bruce had taken to leaving the omelet. Today was no exception, Alfred noted, stepping out of his employer's bedroom, tray in hand. This was unlike Bruce Wayne, who would force down bloody slabs of meat when sick rather than risk the loss of muscle mass. But Master Bruce hadn't been himself since the Joker died. Alfred expected some change naturally, but he had hoped his master might relax. Instead, Bruce had attacked Gotham's criminal population with renewed intensity. When Alfred questioned him, Bruce had explained the necessity of striking while the power vacuum remained. Eminently sensible. Yet, Bruce's urgency seemed like that of a man running out of time. Alfred found Bruce in the Batcave, of course, already suited, sending revised specifications to Lucius for the new Batmobile. "Sir," Alfred ventured, "given that we have no pressing leads this evening and sundown is not for another 45 minutes, I thought I might tempt you with what remains of your breakfast." 42 minutes. Bruce kept his eyes on the Bat-computer screen. Alfred paused for a moment, wondering what possibly could have driven the man he raised to keep secrets from him for the first time in 30 years. "Very good, sir," Alfred said, before leaving the room. Wonder Tower. Hugo Strange followed Ra's al Ghul out onto Wonder Tower's viewing platform. Arkham City gleamed beneath them, a peaceful patchwork of neon and steel. "How is our mayor?" Ra's inquired, tightly gripping the railing to steady himself. "Playing his part," Strange observed. "People seem quite convinced. It will be morally repugnant to a few, but even they cannot deny the impulse." Ra's closed his eyes to wipe the slate clean. Strange had noticed the subtle glitches in his master's behavior. The professor had conducted enough experiments to recognize the symptoms of mental trauma, as well when a patient was trying to mask its effects. "I wish you would allow me access to the source of your power," Strange said benignly. "I could help. It is here, isn't it? In the base of this tower." Ra's laughed, and suddenly Strange couldn't breathe. "You think you see weakness," Ra's squeezed. Strange felt his throat tightening, life ebbing away. "How wrong you are." Ra's released him, and Strange dropped to his knees, sucking in air. Ra's walked back to his place overlooking the city. "We will rid the Gotham of its vermin. Nothing can stop us." Strange massaged his neck. "You think he will stand by idly while we murder thousands?" "Batman won't," Ra's replied, "but Bruce Wayne won't have any choice." Guardian Angel. "To find Batman, find the injustice." "Please, God, don't hurt me." The man in the suit backed away, tossing his wallet onto the ground. His attackers closed in. One of them scooped up the wallet and fingered the notes inside. "Jackpot!" The other cracked his knuckles and threw a punch, dropping the suit to his knees, holding his broken face. "Money won't save you, but he can." The ripple of taut fabric as a shadowy cape swooped down. "He'll go for the sweep." The thug was busy counting when Batman took his legs. The wallet spun into the air as the sound of his skull cracking pinballed around the alley. The other thug turned and charged. His style has changed. Less elaborate. Batman threw his arm into the swinging hook, popping the shoulder joint. "Strike the vulnerable areas. End it fast." His fist slammed the thug's tattooed solar plex, stopping his body like a bolt of electricity. The longer the fight, the more it hurts him. Batman stood over the unconscious men, head tilted back, eyes shut, breathing hard. How can he leave them? They don't deserve to live. Azrael looked down from the rooftop. He studied Batman for long enough. He knew what Gotham needed. Divine justice. Homecoming. 254 days, 17 hours and 9 minutes. It seemed like a lifetime, yet still he hungered, every waking moment a test of will. He'd never truly be free from the cravings, but at least now he'd found a means to channel all that pain into something productive, something worthwhile. He'd returned to Santa Prisca broken and desperate, still reeling from his run-in with Batman in Arkham City. He was searching for solace, a fresh start, a means of making the nightmares stop. When he arrived in the slums of his homeland and found a young boy bleeding out from a gunshot wound in the street, mother wailing by his side, Bane realized what had really drawn him back here. Beneath the veneer of luxury resorts and spas, Santa Prisca was a hotbed of corruption, ruled by vicious cartels, drug lords amped up on venom, embroiled in a bloody turf war that had claimed countless innocent lives. Bane had started from the bottom and worked his way up. Now, as the sun bled out over the horizon, he admired the fruits of his labor. 12 severed heads lined up on the beach in various states of decay. The 12 most powerful drug lords on the island. His work was almost done. Just one target remained. Pianadura, the stone fortress in which he had been born, raised, and forever corrupted. It was time to tear it all down. The trap. 3 thugs, 1 hostage. Easy. First, the guy with the gun. Barbara dropped behind the nearest of Joker's goons, crouched and launched herself back up. One a screamo stick in the back of the knee to drop him. The other met the back of his skull on the way down. Next, the guy with the knife. He'd had a knife anyway. He had a broken wrist now. A wrist she caught between both her sticks and snapped when he lunged at her. She let the arm drop and swung her weapons back and over her shoulders, onto his head. The sad clown makeup looked perfect as he fell to the floor. And now the mop-up. She dropped and swung a sweeping kick to meet the last thug as he charged her, sending him barreling into a wall. Easy. The hostage was crying, curled fetal with his back to her from the corner of the room. Odd, for a police officer in Gotham. They've usually seen worse. It's okay. Barbara took a step towards him. It's me, Batgirl. The sobbing got worse, louder, hysterical, and then Barbara froze. He wasn't crying at all. What's wrong? The officer crooned. Aren't you going to rescue me? Not exactly. Barbara's eyes scanned for exits. Her feet took a fighting stance. Well then, said Joker, twisting round to face her until he was lounging in the blood-stained police officer's uniform on his side. Why don't you rescue Commissioner Gordon instead? Resolutions. January 1st. Happy New Year, diary. I feel melancholy. The old tales, the old dates hold no magic anymore. My New Year's resolution is to find new occasions to celebrate. January 21st. I feel reborn. Today I celebrated National Hugging Day for the first time. I went to Elliott Memorial Hospital, covered myself in infected blood, and visited the children's ward. February 2nd. Happy Groundhog Day. My new house guest and I are going to watch the stream from Punxsutawney together. If the rodent predicts an early spring, I'll let my new friend go. But if the groundhog retreats to his burrow, I'll bury my guest alive. June 5th. World Environment Day. A worthy, important cause. I passed this message on to a class of school children by forcing them to drink ACE chemical runoffs. They won't pollute now. September 19th. Dear Diary, Happy International Talk Like a Pirate Day. Today I cut off a man's leg and nailed a wooden peg in its place. He couldn't walk the plank. Very disappointing. Checked on my scurvy victim, but she wasn't ready. Next year. September 21st. Happy World Peace Day. I left bombs at the Kuraki embassy. October 29th. Halloween tempts me. I promised Batman I would be present at his end, and All Hallows Eve is the perfect time to bid farewell to him. I will make this one exception in my year of alternative celebrations. October 31st. Damn Scarecrow. Poison Chalice. Cash lifted the framed photo out of the box and placed it on the desk. He still remembered the day he pinned it to the inside of his locker during his first shift at the asylum. It had been with him ever since. "Nice-looking family you got there, sir," the sergeant remarked, busily clearing out the previous owner's possession from a drawer. Cash was close to telling him it was a lucky charm, but he knew the reaction he'd get. The kid didn't know how crazy things could get. He'd soon end up as superstitious as all the rest. Besides, something was telling Cash luck might not be worth a damn around here. He would be the 5th station supervisor in as many months. The others were all gone. Assassinated. Cash knew he was putting himself in the crosshairs, tempting fate. But the commissioner had asked, and he couldn't refuse a friend. The sergeant finished packing the dead man's things just as Gordon arrived. "Aaron," Jim said, offering his hand. "Didn't think I'd see you tonight," Cash replied, shaking the commissioner's hand. Gordon always came down for this part. It was the introduction. Both men stepped out of the elevator onto the roof. The back signal illuminated the night sky. "You know," Cash said, "we have met already." "I know," Gordon said, "but it's tradition." Just another word for superstition, Cash thought. On the prowl. Want to find a weak link in the security system? Look for the man with a gun, especially when they're new in town. Poor guy didn't even know the first rule of Gotham, Selina mused. The mantra thugs from Bleak to the Bowery drilled into new recruits. Always look up. Well, he'd know it now. Selina dragged his unconscious body behind a dumpster and slipped through a vent into Arkham Asylum's administrative building. She was late. The meeting had started. Ended, maybe? Scarecrow's voice, sonorous yet raspy, carried along the vent like a snake slithering through dry grass. Another voice replied, young, angry, and disguised. Footsteps, then silence. Worthless. Selina needed more. Names, details, a damn date. Batman was more inclined to ignore the occasional heist when she had information he needed. And besides, it was fun having something to wield over him, seeing the pained, pleading expression on Gotham's apex predator's face when they were alone and she had the upper hand. She peeked through the vent. Scarecrow's office. No guards by the door. Good. Selina dropped down, twisting her body to land on all fours, and then an arc of electricity lashed out from the ceiling. Selina dodged it, all reflexes, and saw her attacker floating above the vent. Since when did Scarecrow have security drones? Damn it, Selina, she thought, plotting her exit over the sound of the alarm. Always look up. Cargo. The dozing soldiers snapped awake, gripped their semi-automatic rifles, and flicked the safeties off. They weren't sure what it was that had them spooked. Turbulence, perhaps? The unit commander nodded towards the container, trigger finger poised. The metal box was taking up most of the airship's cargo hold. It must have weighed several tons, and that wasn't including what was trapped inside, the thing these men had spent several weeks tracking through marshland on the outskirts of Gotham. Not everyone who started the mission had made it. Their ravaged bodies left behind unceremoniously. This mission didn't exist, and now, neither did they. A plainclothes agent was reading the file, holding a handkerchief to his face to try and stem the smell of rotting fish emanating from the container. He only had words, photographs, patient history. He wouldn't get to see the creature for real. A relief. The agent looked up and spotted the panicked faces. These soldiers were tired and burnt out. Last thing he needed was any accidents. "Easy, boys," he yelled over the engine roar, slapping the metal prison. "He ain't waking up for another month." Within the container, the tranquilizer had all but worn off. The opaque membrane withdrew across the eye. The vertical, slit-shaped pupils dilated. Croc was awake, and he wanted off this airship. The mission. Clark stood on the littered sidewalk looking up at the sign. Until now, this place had been a rumor, whispered in the dark. The Deacon's mission. By the sounds of it, you had to take your bread with a little preaching. They could try, Clark thought. He wasn't that hungry. Inside, a couple dozen men had their heads down, folding up tables and unstacking towers of chairs into rows. Clark spotted a large stainless steel pot, its lid ajar, the slit puffing steam. He made straight for it. His mouth hung open expectantly as he grabbed the lid. "They wanted to clear that away." Hand fell on his shoulder and squeezed. "But he told me you'd come." The voice had that benevolence only a servant of God could muster. Clark turned around. The deacon's graying hair and lined face betrayed a searing vitality. "I'd like something to eat, please, sir," Clark heard himself. The last and only person he addressed that way being his father. The deacon released his grip and proceeded to ladle hot soup into a bowl. "The Lord needs us strong," he proclaimed, passing it to Clark along with the spoon. The warm liquid snaked down his throat and coiled within his belly. It felt good. Better than he expected. Clark went for another spoonful. Maybe he was that hungry after all. Cheap Shot. A close shot with Deadshot by Jack Ryder. "Are you ready, Jack?" Batman asked, looking straight at me, one eye filled with admiration, the other with respect. "I'm ready, Batman," I replied bravely. "Then let's do this, Jack. Together," Batman said. Asked, really. The Dark Knight stood up from behind our cover then, as we prepared to take on the deadly assassin Deadshot together. Was I afraid? Dear reader, I was terrified, but I couldn't let it show. Batman needed me. Then I saw it, the laser sight playing like a lover's tongue across his nipple. "Batman, no!" I shouted dramatically. I dived forward then, knocking the caped crusader to the ground as the bullet whizzed past my ear. Batman was back on his feet in an instant, however. He grabbed me and pulled us both into cover behind the chimney chute in the bombed ruin of Arkham City. "What now, Jack?" Batman asked, his voice crackling slightly under the strain. I thought for a moment. "You need to hide behind cover whenever he's looking in our direction, Batman," I explained patiently, "and then try and reach the vent under the helipad." Batman looked at the distance between him and the sharpshooter marksman. "You can do it, Batman," I said reassuringly. "I know you can." Contingency. Slade pushed the hunting knife along the whetstone, the smooth scrape of steel underscoring the live combat feed. The last Cobra went offline with a burst of radio interference. Slade shook his head. "Damn amateurs." The surveillance drone was circling above Bleak Island, relaying the battle below. The Knight was protecting the cloudburst and failing. Batman had just taken apart his support. Now it was just the two of them left. Slade glanced at the monitor, their heat signatures stalking each other through the city streets. He ran his thumb along the blade, still dull. This was torture, forced to watch from a mobile command center. The Ace Chemical siege, the occupation, everything. Batman had taken on an entire army and was winning. Slade didn't belong here observing. It was like watching someone play a video game badly, itching to pick up the controller. Contingency wasn't his style. He was better than that. But Scarecrow knew just how to sell it. He promised the soldier an end to those nightmares, the fear that made his hands tremble. Revenge, that is what you seek, and I can give it to you. The Knight's tank took a strike. Systems critical. A plume of white static erupted on the screen. No one was making it out of that thing alive. Seconds later, the radio crackled. "It is time," Scarecrow announced. "Batman is yours." Slade tested the blade. It was sharp enough now. Burn notice. Linz took a generous swig from his hip flask, then pushed through the heavy oak doors into Tomasa Panenza's office. "Garfield, have a seat." His boss's plump red face and expanded waistline betrayed the fact that he was bankrupt, financially as well as morally. Linz shrunk into a chair as Panenza dispensed with small talk, then began to justify the unceremonious firing of this lowly FX artist. Despite critical acclaim, The Inferno had recovered less than a quarter of its inflated budget in the 6 months since its release. Such a high-profile failure, combined with increased attention from the IRS, meant that laundering millions of dollars of mob money through Panenza Studio was no longer a viable business plan. "I've always liked you, Linz," he said, like a veteran comforting an animal before pushing the plunger on the lethal injection. "But the industry is different now. As a studio, we need to adapt or perish, and that means making some tough decisions." Garfield declined the proffered cigar with a wave of his hand. He felt sick watching the greasy old bastard wrap his lip around a wad of dried leaves that cost 300 times his monthly salary. "I'm sure a man of your intelligence knew this day would come, Garfield. I'm sure you prepared for every eventuality." Linz was prepared, all right. He struck a match off the solid oak table and held it up to light the man's cigar. He met his boss's gaze for the last time, then expelled a mouthful of nitroglycerin through the dancing flame. Frozen out. Wrapped in cold, Nora slumbered. Deep in slumber, Nora dreamed. She dreamt of Victor, of the man he was, and of the man she knew he'd become. She heard him sometimes, his new, metallic voice piercing through the frozen veil of her sleep like an ice pick. She heard his curses, his muttered threats, and when whatever new therapy he was working on failed, when cells refused to divide and line up like soldiers on parade, when carefully authored mutations lay stubbornly dormant in unresponsive genes, she heard his harsh, anguished screams. It had been gradual, this thawing of her consciousness back into something alive, something that flowed thickly, liquidly, from dream to memory and could even snatch in traces of the outside world. She was trapped, imprisoned in frozen flesh, but not afraid. Fear seemed impossible for her cooled brain, but there was a kind of freedom in this new existence, freedom from the Huntington's racked bodies she'd left behind. "This will work, Nora. This will work." Victor talked to her most days, worked through scientific problems as if she was his lab assistant, professed his love, reminisced about the early months of their marriage. But the memories were distant now, Nora knew. The details became vaguer every time. She wasn't just a frozen body, Nora had long realized. She was an idealized memory, frozen in time. Was this love? Victor said he could save her, but every second's passing drew them further apart. No. Nora remembered love. Love was warm. Fallout. "Your Honor," Gordon shouted, "the man's insane." "For the last time, Commissioner, we are not here to discuss the prisoner's state of mind." Judge Wessel looked across at Gordon from the parole board panel, a look Jim had seen a dozen times this morning. "Please," Wessel's watery eyes were saying, "don't make this harder than it is." Gordon shot a more succinct look back. To his left, the prisoner started talking. Again. Come now, Your Honor. As slanderous as the Commissioner's comments are, he's only expressing his frustration at the farcical nature of this so-called legal proceeding. Perhaps he doesn't understand that his presence is merely for appearance's sake. You are decorative detective, Riddler concluded, flashing Jim a smug smile. Gordon understood all right. Thousands of prisoners, all held illegally and then nearly murdered by Hugo Strange. The inevitable class action lawsuit had left this tedious soul-sapping exercise in its wake. Hundreds of parole hearings that only went one way. The prisoner got their freedom back, and Gordon got a signed declaration that the offender promised to be on their best behavior from here on in. Now, Riddler continued, given that our poor commissioner must endure several hundred more of these hearings, why don't you spare us the tedium of forcing him to reiterate the state's legally soiled case against me and simply grant me the freedom to which I'm entitled? The entire parole board spluttered indignantly. Man's got a point, Gordon conceded as he walked out the door. Power play. No more of this grief crap, thought Scratch. 6 months since Joker died. Time hardly moved on. And if she couldn't move on, well, it's time the gang did. Scratch was smart. Everybody said it. And he had a plan. Harley had one of her freaky Joker statues, the one with a television set sat on the shoulders in her room. Every night she kissed the creepy video reel of his face goodnight, right on the grinning lips. Scratch was going to put a bomb inside it, kill Harley, and decapitate the old boss too. Nothing says put Scratch in charge like that. Harley was out. Gang war with Penguin's crew. That's all they did these days. Defend instead of expand. Scratch was going to change that, he thought, slipping into her room. Red and black, everywhere. The curtains, the carpets, the bed. Like playing cards, Harley said, when she handed out the new uniforms, clubs and hearts. Joker was in the corner, grinning at him. His eyes followed Scratch around the room, interrupted by occasional static. I dare you, they said, as Scratch crept up to the smiling ghost. Sorry, boss, he said, taking out the screwdriver and the small explosive charge. But I gotta do this, for the gang. Bad idea, Scratchy, Joker replied. Scratch froze, terrified. Bad idea, Scratchy, Joker said, same intonation as before. Bad idea, Scratchy. Scratch relaxed. She'd cut it together, made it out of old tapes. But that meant the skull-cracking impact of Harley's baseball bat cut off the thought. Keep your friends close. Master Bruce, you have a visitor. Bruce looked up from his position, curled in a fetal ball on the window ledge. He'd had plenty of visitors since the death of his parents, and endless streams of grown-ups who suffocated him in kindness, patting him on the head and talking in soft, patronizing voices as if a sentence spoken at normal volume might cause the poor little orphan to detonate, like a bomb they'd rather leave undisturbed than risk having diffused. This wasn't one of those people. This was Thomas Elliot. Tommy. The blond boy pushed past Alfred before Bruce could respond. He looked at Bruce and grinned. Thank you, Alfred, Bruce said, trying to sound formal in front of his friend. Alfred coughed awkwardly before leaving the room. It was these moments, when others were around, that he and Bruce were still learning to navigate together. Alfred had reached for Bruce's hand at the funeral only for the boy to snatch it away, embarrassed. Yet he refused to let go during the car ride home. We have to be kind to you. Tommy slumped casually down next to Bruce and fixed him with an intense stare that mirrored Bruce's own. That's what Ms. Hyslop said at school. Everyone's being kind to me, Tommy. It's boring. Tommy thought about this. I wish my parents were dead, he said eventually, and I'd be a billionaire, like you. Bruce's stunned laughter echoed around the Manor's empty room. Wallflower. Pamela stirred from her slumber and squinted at the lone orchid on her nightstand. Conventional wisdom says the Gloriosa could never survive in such a dry, frigid conditions. Just as the doctors had predicted, she herself would wither and die within a month of her admittance to Seattle General's intensive care unit. It had been almost 6 and the flower was in full bloom, while Pamela had never felt stronger or more in tune with the world around her. The orchid had been a gift from her mentor, Professor Jason Woodrow, the man who'd professed his love for her, then left her to die from a toxic cocktail of photohormones he'd forced her to ingest in the lab they shared. Pamela's initial heartache seemed paltry in hindsight. She realized Woodrow's parting gift was far greater than even he could have imagined. The orchid spoke to her now, ethereal whispers of a world beyond these sterile walls, of a higher purpose, a new life. Pamela feigned sleep when the door opened, and the handsome specialist approached the bed to check on her. She thrust out an arm, gripped the back of his neck with inhuman strength, and pulled him in close. The man was powerless to resist as she planted a deadly kiss on his lips. Timid wallflower, Pamela Isley was no more. Poison ivy had arrived. Just Jack. Just Jack, Jack Ryder's weekly column only in the Herald. Hey there, Gotham, Jack's back. I know, it's been a while, but I've been busy. Book deals, TV appearances, negotiations to syndicate this very column. Those things take time, Jack fans. Too much time, actually, and the agents never call you back. So, I decided to give up on them. Besides, I already had a starring role in the televisual event of the season. Yup. That was my handsome face you saw sprouting from an immaculately tailored suit and giving evidence to the Arkham City Commission, and I just want to set the record straight. Yes, I said that Arkham City was legal. Yes, I produced documentary evidence of prisoners being abused, degraded, forced to live in squalor, and nearly killed. And yes, I said that anyone exposed to such horrors should be released and generously compensated. But let's get this one thing straight, Gotham. I was talking about me. I didn't need to see that crap. I shouldn't have even been there. I saw one guy eating his own arm when food supplies ran low. His own arm. I mean, he didn't look like he was accustomed to haute cuisine on the other side of the wall, but me? I dine well, Gotham, and I needed therapy after. So all you losers sending me hate mail, stop it. It's not my fault all the crooks got free. I just wanted Gotham City to repay its debt to me, and I'm sure you do too. Hashtag justice for Jack Ryder, hashtag Jack Rydergate. The Fall. Batman was wrong. He'd always been wrong about Joker. There was no madhouse qualified, no prison secure enough. Jason knew that now, after what he'd seen tonight. Little arms, little legs, little heads crudely, mockingly stitched together. He'd come straight from the kindergarten, followed a trail of innocent blood back to Arkham Asylum. Tracker switched off. Cowl communications disabled. He was a ghost. Batman wouldn't find him until it was done. Weeping parents, fighting over patchwork corpses. The sanatorium had been derelict for years. A burnt-out patch of dead earth on top, a forgotten warren of cells below. Good, Jason thought. He's already in the dirt. There was a moral line that Bruce had sworn never to cross. Jason would cross it for him. Jason had been watching a grief-stricken mother piece her son together when the kindergarten speaker system came to life. No, Robin, he thought. Push it down. Jason pulled back the heavy iron doors that would have once led into a laundry chute and dropped into the dark. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, Joker sang. It was a net halfway down that caught him. It broke with his weight, sending him tumbling out of the end of the chute onto the granite floor. Jason gritted his teeth. Breathe through the pain. The first swing of the crowbar took out 2 teeth. The second broke his ankle. All the king horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again, Joker was singing. Fixation. I do not allow him visitors, Warden Sharp spluttered angrily as Batman walked past. It's not a social call. Inside the cell, harsh fluorescent bulbs bounced their light off the sterile, white padded walls. It's really you! You're here! The cell's straitjacket occupant flung himself from the corner of the room until he was slobbering, weeping at Batman's armored boots. I'm so glad it's you, Bats, Joker sobbed. They think I'm mad. Batman kicked upwards, flipped the maniac onto his back, and brought the foot back down to pin him there. 3 dead, all children. You've been locked up here since Blackgate. Batman pushed down, ribs cracked. Tell me how! The sudden violence, the guttural sound of Batman's roar surprised them both. Batman backed towards the door, appalled. Suddenly freed, Joker rolled on the floor, hysterical. I knew it, he giggled. I knew you cared. Batman drew his cape around himself, pushed the anger, the sudden self-disgust back down. You got out, Joker. How? Maybe I'm mad. Joker scrabbled backwards, leaned against the wall. Because this is the first I'm hearing of it. He paused then, and spoke with sickening sincerity. I didn't kill your kitties, and you don't need excuses to drop by. When Sharp returned with security, Joker was alone, grinning ear to ear. I'm in his head, Sharpie. False dawn. Gotham's no kind of place to raise a child. Those were Ellen's first words when he told her about the promotion and transfer to GCPD. To say the move had put a strain on their marriage would be an understatement. The first few months were difficult, but gradually she'd established roots, made new friends, warmed to life in the city. Commissioner Gordon had even promised to use his influence to secure their son Tyler a place at McLaughlin Academy. Life was good. Then Arkham City happened. Elaine's doubts resurfaced. The honeymoon period was over. He'd convinced her to stick it out for another year. If things didn't improve, they'd move back to her family in Keystone. The promise was a gamble. He hated Keystone as much as he hated the in-laws, and at the time Gotham looked like it was spiraling into the abyss. But now, 9 months on, as he stood with his family among a throng of tourists on the Lady of Gotham's viewing platform, he was satisfied that the gamble had paid off. There was a different feel about Gotham these days. Joker was dead, the nightmare of Arkham City was a distant memory, and crime continued to fall. Across the water, amid the glittering lanterns of Chinatown, Halloween decorations were being hoisted high above the street. Dad, are you going to take me to the parade? Sorry, kiddo. Daddy has to work, but your mother will take you, right, honey? Elaine jabbed him in the ribs, smiling. Whatever you say, Officer Owens. Change of heart. More guns, Mr. Wayne, said Lucius, eyeing the proposed specification for the new Batmobile. They were in Lucius's office. Bruce's office, technically, though Lucius spent most time here. Bruce had turned up, dutifully, by the biannual department heads meeting at Wayne Tech. Lucius had watched Bruce work the room, smiling and shaking the hands of senior technicians, biochemists, engineers, software security experts, making just enough informed conversation with Lucius's chief system engineer to impress yet not shock her. And then he and Bruce had retired here. Lucius doubted anyone else had noticed Wayne favoring his right leg as it recovered from whatever he subjected it to the night before. Can you do it? Bruce asked. All the easy charm from the meeting was gone. It would seem like unfriendliness is a casual observer, Lucius thought. But it was the opposite. Bruce did his friends, the people he trusted, the honor of not pretending. Lucius smiled. It wouldn't be easy. Waytek had been out of the arms industry for a while, could claim the guns for testing materials when he made the order, he reasoned, and do all the prototyping alone. Why the change of heart, Mr. Wayne? Lucius, always the pragmatist, had long campaigned for a more offensively equipped Batmobile. Just in case. Bruce had resisted him until now. Ever since Joker died, his employer had been not aggressive exactly. Lucius couldn't quite identify the change. Just in case, Bruce said as he left the room. Down the rabbit hole. The shear's chipped and rusted blade squeaked open, nearly missing the neck as they collected a soft clump of blonde hair. There, pretty. Don't move an inch. These bolted daggers smile more than a pinch. In return, a whimper stifled beneath thick duct tape. Hatter's grubby fingers gripped and squirmed around the cutter's oversized ears, one in each hand. Squinting, his tongue curled up in concentration, a pile of butchered wigs lay tossed behind him. This was the last one, and it had to be a success. In for a penny, in for a pound. Let's hope it's just hair that falls to the ground. Like a crocodile's bite, the shears clapped shut, followed by the thudded wobble of a stool as Hodder hopped down onto the floor to gauge his work. Frabjous, what a win now for the hairs on your chinny chin. Hatter placed the shears down and picked up a cutthroat razor, delicately fanning out the blade as he turned to face his terrified creation. Queen-like and flanked by a row of defiled mannequins, he couldn't get over how well the blue dress fit the man's slender frame. But then that was why he chose him. He'll do for now, Hatter thought, until someone better came along. Someone just like his Alice. White noise. Dr. Kirk Langstrom surveyed the miracle of evolution splayed out on the table before him. Desmondus rotundus, the common vampire bat. It was perhaps the most magnificent creature he'd ever studied up close, aside from Francine, of course. Langstrom dialed up the volume on the sound system and shut his eyes, letting Brahms' Third Symphony swell in his ears. The music conjured memories of happier times with his beautiful wife, before his diagnosis, before the rot set in. The tinnitus had been subtle at first, like the low hum of a refrigerator in another room, a mildly irritating whine he couldn't quite place, yet couldn't quite ignore. As the weeks wore on, the noise grew overwhelming, until Kirk could hear nothing else unless he concentrated hard enough. The doctor's words, however, had been loud and clear. Kirk's affliction was rare, chronic, and irreversible. The thought of never enjoying his favorite symphonies again was agonizing, but it was Francine's voice he would miss the most. The subtle inflection she adopted when she teased him, and the way she laughed as though the little girl inside her had never grown up. Kirk wasn't prepared to let all that go without a fight. He was a man of science, for Christ's sakes, and science would find a way. The answer, Kirk knew, was staring up at him from the dissection table. Legacy. Bruce gripped his father's hand as the elevator rocketed skyward. Confined spaces still made him anxious, but his father provided comfort, just as he did on all those nights Bruce would wake screaming, paralyzed by fear, reliving the moment he'd found himself trapped inside the dank, bat-infested cave beneath the grounds of the manor. He breathed a sigh of relief when the elevator finally slowed to a halt and the doors opened into Thomas Wayne's plush new office at the summit of Wayne Tower. Take a look, son, his father said, leading Bruce to the vast windows overlooking Gotham's smog-shrouded skyline. The boy pressed his palms against the cold glass and felt a dizzying rush as he gazed down at the miniature city below. Gotham's been good to us, Bruce, and we have a responsibility to give something back. This tower's just the beginning of our legacy, a legacy I hoped you'll continue long after I'm gone. Bruce looked up to meet his father's eyes. The thought of losing him had never crossed the young boy's mind, and suddenly Bruce was back in that cave, alone, the piercing screech of bats filling his ears. Prodigal. Nightwing grappled to the warehouse roof and secreted himself in darkness. He'd chased the truck here on foot and was using a technique Bruce had taught him to control his breathing. A plum of steaming breath could easily give away his position to the guards by the skylight. Not that they sounded very observant. "I hate the stinking place. Give me Gotham any day," the first thug said. "Yeah, sooner we get back there, the better," his buddy replied. Nightwing was well aware of his adopted city's shortcomings. He just didn't need to hear it from these goons. He considered taking them out, sneaking further inside. No, best do this clean. Still, no way we could get away with something like this with Batman around. Who we gotta worry about here? Nightwing? He's like baby Batman. Two electrified Eskrima sticks bounced up and struck the base of both skulls, cutting their laughter short. That nerve was as raw now as the day he left the manor. Bruce had sent him away like a parent packing a teenage son off to college. He wasn't grown up yet, not in Bruce's eyes. Looking down through the angled glass, scores of men were busy at work. Hundreds of crates, thousands of guns. The operation was bigger than he thought, and it was heading back to Gotham. "You missed this one, Bruce." This college kid was going home. Masquerade. Screw Dad, and screw Bruce Wayne. Barbara walked through Wayne Manor, dropping the mask and cape from her masquerade ball outfit. She should have guessed that other people would have had the bat idea too. Not that it mattered. Whatever she wore, she'd still be 20 years younger than everybody here. Jeez, she'd rather Dad start dating again than drag her to these things. At least she had her laptop, thank God. She just needed an access point that wasn't buried beneath 15 layers of paranoid rich guy encryption. A library, maybe? Barbara pulled back the huge oak door and slipped into the room, set her computer on the desk and... Damn it. We're not all billionaires, Bruce. Some of us need to check we haven't been outbid on that new pair of Eskrima sticks. In fact, Barbara decided, didn't rich guys like Wayne owe people like her a little unauthorized net access from time to time? She used the program she'd written to crack GCPD's network. The time Dad left her sitting in an interview room during Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. It was fast, and it found hidden networks too. Not that Bruce Wayne would need many of... What was Entrance 6? The signal was strong, close by. Even stronger than the library wireless, in fact. What the hell? Barbara thought, as she tore its defenses apart. She felt it before she heard anything, a gust of cold air as the bookcase behind her disappeared. Payback. Penguin yelped as his foot broke through a sodden floorboard. Moments later, one of his bodyguards burst into the room, brandishing a pistol. I heard a scream. He saw Penguin trying to extricate himself. Boss, what's wrong? What does it look like? The bodyguard scrambled to find the words. He hoped it wasn't a trick question. Never mind, Penguin barked. Just help me. Holstering his gun, the bodyguard heaved Penguin free and started brushing the watery pulp from his trousers. Get out of it, Penguin snapped, finding his balance against the windowsill. Out there, looming above, Gotham's latest monstrosity, Wayne Plaza. This was my old man's study, Penguin proclaimed. It'd kill him if he had to see that poxy thing day and night. Cobblepot Manor had been derelict for years, left to rot. In Penguin's mind, just the way Bruce Wayne wanted it. a permanent reminder of defeat. The bodyguard was tugging at a strip of wallpaper. "So I guess we wait for compensation, huh?" "Not likely." Penguin scooted back to the broken floorboard, dropped to his knees, and plunged his arm into the hole. "You think I'm waiting around for Gotham City to cough up? You got another thing coming." With that, he pulled out a yellowing wad of paper, the deeds to a company operating out of Bloodhaven, North Refrigeration. Penguin pocketed his ace and lit a cigar. "Don't count the cobblepots out yet, Mr. Wayne." Dollatron. Mr. O'Neill staggered into the spotlight, alone, gripping a briefcase. Beyond the harsh lights, the depths of the circus tent were a black void. He squinted, trying to focus. His sleep-deprived mind was playing tricks. He thought for a moment he could see an audience. "Welcome!" a voice boomed operatically. The spotlight shifted. There he was, the pig-masked man who'd summoned him, the professor, standing proudly behind the small boy, his blood-tinged hands finger-drumming those delicate shoulders. A pained murmur sounded from the child, muffled through a plain white face mask. At its edge, a shoreline of weeping, fused flesh, his salted slug of a tongue writhing in mouth slit. The horror wasn't unmanageable. It was there in front of him. It was fact, just as he was a parent and this was his son, butchered and transformed. O'Neill's stomach imploded and bent him double, retching onto the straw-bedded ground. "Daddy Man is upset," whined the professor. "Daddy Man not pleased with our work." He loosed a terrifying squeal. The young boy moaned like a busted instrument. "I've got the money." O'Neill wiped the bile from his mouth, then popped the briefcase and threw it to the ground, wads of green packed tight. "Give me my son, please." The professor shook his head. "Not your son now, mine Dollatron." Before O'Neill could fathom the meaning of that word, something caught his eye. There, in the void, they were being watched. Faces shuffled closer, plain white masks, dozens of them, encircled. Sons, mothers, fathers, once like him. Visiting hours. Prison. The irony wasn't lost on Quincy Sharp, but that didn't mean he appreciated it. Quincy cried on the hard, cramped bed in his small, sterile cell, longing for the splendor of his city hall. He wished his master was here. Dr. Hugo Strange had awoken Quincy, lifted him to a higher state of awareness, made him mayor of Gotham. The therapy, the drugs, the loss of free will, a fair price for such a gift. In return, Quincy had defended Strange through both trials. Even now, he clutched onto Strange's remaining secrets, dear mementos of a parted friend. "It's okay, Quincy," he heard Strange say. "I'm here." "Hugo?" Quincy asked, wiping his tears on the cheap Arkham City jumpsuit the guards made him wear. There he was, Dr. Hugo Strange, with his radiant white lab coat and paternal smile. "Quincy, my servant, my friend," Hugo said. "We don't have much time." Quincy was crying again with joy. "How? Master, how did you—" "Psychology, Quincy. Science. I'm a being of suggestion, etched into your subconscious by my living self." The therapy, Quincy realized. The hypnosis, the drugs. "Stay with me, Master, please." Quincy tried to grab hold a phantom hand. "I cannot," Strange said, looking benevolently down at Quincy, stroking his hair with a touch the prisoner couldn't feel. "But there is one last service you can perform for me." "Anything, Hugo, please." "First, remove the sheet from your bed, Quincy, and tie it to the light fixture on the ceiling." The demon's head. The messenger dropped down onto the puddled street and stayed crouched in shadow, her hand resting on the hilt of a katana. Caution was innate, trained into every sinew and fiber of her body. She waited for the drunken couple to stagger past and approached her canvas, a wall of decaying posters. She unfolded the stencil and held it in place. The small nozzle concealed in her wrist guard released a pressurized spray of black paint. With a few waves of her hand, the image was complete. It would join the others she had spent the nights emblazoning on Gotham's walls. Most people would think it was just another work of art. They wouldn't know of the war that raged, the war to bring him back, to resurrect Ra's al Ghul. The air whistled. Instinct turned her head as a blade grazed skin and embedded itself in the center of the dripping insignia. The assassin stepped out of her throwing stance and drew a sword from her back. You openly defy the League of Assassins. The penalty is death. Wiping the blood from her cheek, the messenger faced her enemy. There is no league without him. That is the truth. Surveying her surroundings, the assassin approached. You will not find his body. What makes you think we're still looking? The messenger unsheathed her katana. The demon's head will live again. Social outcast. Why do you attack Batman? He is based. You are fat. Riddler deleted the email, and all the others like it, as prickly hot anger and shame squirmed through his insides. No point denying it. #CrusaderGate had been a disastrous social media campaign. He couldn't understand it. It seemed that the internet's idiotic and easily roused rabble could froth itself into a full-fat cappuccino frenzy over white knights, but offer it up a dark one on a plate, and you get a soy latte's worth of indignation at best. Didn't they understand what Batman had done? The memories rise up like bile. Riddler is back in Arkham City. Batman places an explosive hat, Riddler's own invention, on his head, forces him to march in endless circles lest the device detonates. It's hours before Riddler realizes the trick, that the explosives had been diffused. Having borne witness to his shame, this computer was tainted now. Yet Riddler paused. He still had electrical burns from the last time he'd angrily ripped 128 gigs of RAM from a motherboard. His search for Hammer concluded when another email arrived. To the owner of Enigmatic Holdings Ltd., Gotham City Council hereby approves your purchase of the disused sewage and watering processing facilities beneath the city, it began. For the first time in months, Edward smiled. Critter. Roach wrenched against his restraints and watched the beetle skitter across Scarecrow's gloved hand. He wasn't sure what made him sicker, Scarecrow's creepy new face, or the rocking of the damn cargo container they were hidden inside. Joker would find him, surely. They couldn't have gone far from the steel mill. Fascinating creatures, aren't they? Scarecrow said. So small. Crane was holding a bug by one of its legs now, as the other 5 limbs scrabbled at the air. A wave hit the boat, and the poor thing swung back and forth. No warning colors either. He dropped the bug to the floor. It scuttled towards Roach, who fought back the urge to stamp on it. He didn't want to look afraid. Do they want their predators to fall for it? Scarecrow asked, watching another insect creep across his palm. To sink their teeth into this fragile shell. Scarecrow made a fist, crushing the insect in his hand. The beast that does so will regret it, Scarecrow explained, wiping the mashed up insect into a glass beaker. Not through sickness or death. He added chemicals to the beaker now, muddling the mixture into a greenish-black sludgy cocktail. But through the hallucinations this creature's toxic secretion causes. Through the beatings of their overworked heart, the adrenaline coursing through their bloodstream. Through fear. He turned to Roach now, the beaker in one hand, a funnel in the other. My toxin failed me at Arkham. Together, we will ensure that never happens again. Lab rat. Pyrophobia, fear of fire. Some fears make more sense than others, Alex thought, scrunching his eyes shut against the flames and retreating into the furthest corner of his cell. He read a case study once, when he was sane, about a man with pharmacophobia, a fear of medicine. The poor man suffered from epileptic seizures, yet refused to take his pills. Madness. Counterintuitive. Misfiring self-preservation instincts rejecting the very things that preserved. But fear of fire. That made evolutionary sense. Alex comforted himself, picturing humanity's ancestors scattering across the veldt as flames licked dry grass. He wasn't mad. He was just too sensitive. His phobia was just awareness of the damage that the inferno raging in front of him could do to his delicate tissues. If it was real. Simon had summoned him, Alex remembered, accused him of betrayal, and now he was here, a test subject, meat for the grinder, brain matter for the thresher, more data for a stag. They'd stopped pumping toxin into his cell hours ago, but still the fires burned around him, a phantom wall of flame. They started closing in. Alex Sator screamed as the flames consumed him, screams of terror, not pain. To an outside observer, the result was slapstick, a white-coated scientist flailing at nothing, but all Alex could see was the flames eating at his flesh, gnawing down to the bone. Revenant. Zach hated Mondays. He'd been working the early shift at the morgue for all of 3 weeks, and he was already starting to resemble a pallid corpse. The bourbon-induced hangover certainly wasn't helping. His stomach had been growling all morning, and it was still an hour until lunch. His bowels lurched at the thought of another plate of slop from the commissary, only this time the accompanying growl was deeper, more resonant. From another place. He scanned the room for the source. The stiffs sometimes released pockets of gas when they started to decompose, pungent gifts from the afterlife. But this sound was different, almost like a word trying to be formed, trapped by shuddering lips. It was coming from one of the new cold storage units. These compartments weren't supposed to have locks, but this one had 4. They weren't usually this big either, and they certainly didn't have wingtip branding. The door swung open and plums of dry ice poured out around Zach's legs. As the lights flickered on, he could see the outline of a hulking corpse spread out on the floor. It was inhumanly large and breathing. Whoa, 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 whoa. Zach slipped on the tiles and landed hard, sending his glasses skidding across the room. Feeling with his hands, he worked his way over the huge slab of cold muscle to the wrist, as thick as a thigh. He wiped the frost off the plastic ID tag and strained to see the name. Solomon Grundy. Like the nursery rhyme. The body shifted, its giant lungs filling with ice-cold air. The voice was rough, guttural, angry. Born on a Monday. Office romance. Robin stood at Oracle's side as they watched a 3D model of an inconspicuous blood cell rotate on the Batman's computer monitor. He's still showing no symptoms? Oracle asked as she delved deeper into the cell structure. Cell walls were intact, plasma healthy and clear. Nothing, Tim replied. Oracle glanced over her shoulder. Tim was staring straight ahead, arms folded, the muscle in his jaw flexed. No smile, not today. He was working hard. They both were. Gotham demanded everything of them every day. Come on, Mr. Adams, Oracle asked, fighting off a wave of exhaustion. What are you hiding? The protein channels, maybe? Tim leant in to point at the image. When he drew his arm away, his hand grazed Barbara's neck. Barbara stopped typing, caught her breath. Tim went still. The moment drew itself out, each second marked by the clock tower's mechanical heartbeat. And then Tim turned away. We can't do this. Not again. Hematology never was your strong suit, huh, Drake? Barbara joked painfully, but Tim was already gone. She sat there wondering why he didn't come back, and why she didn't try and stop him, like he must have hoped she would. But why make things harder than they had to be? Gotham came first. The job. That's the choice they made. They could turn their backs on each other, but not on that. Taking out the trash. Garbage collectors? Asked Pipes, sat in the Hell's Gate office holding the stained second-hand uniform at arm's length, like a new parent with their first dirty diaper. You, completely sure about this, boss? We're sure, Dent growled from across the desk. Pipes didn't argue. It wasn't nice Harvey speaking. You could tell after a while, the way a group of school friends can tell the pair of identical twins among them apart. It's not about the voice. Not always. It's about the face. Which eye swings around faster to look at you? Which side of the mouth? The lantern jaw or the charred, twisted lips? The smile plays across first. We need a front for the bank job, Dent said, and you owe us. All of you. The compensation claims. Arkham City had been corrupt as hell, sure, but Pipes had run-ins with enough dirty cops to know justice flowed one way in Gotham. Well, it does if you haven't got the best lawyer the city ever saw running your class action suit from behind the scenes. I get it, boss. I do, Pipes stammered. It's just Hell's Gate waste disposal and legal services? Really? Dent leant forward. Pipes tried not to shudder as the weeping skin peeled from the leather chair. Trust me, Nice Harvey answered. They're one and the same in this town. Showtime. Live in 10, Vicky, her cameraman said. They had the steps to themselves. Huddles of reporters looked at her enviously over the police cordon. It was a technicality, really, but as a material witness to Sharp's crimes, she'd given evidence at the courthouse that morning. She'd been impossible to get rid of after that. Showtime. Good evening, Gotham. I'm Vicky Vale. Behind me stands Solomon Wayne Courthouse, once part of Arkham City, today the venue in which former Mayor Quincy Sharp was acquitted of his participation in that conspiracy. I am vindicated, Sharp screamed, bursting out of the courthouse and into a bombardment of camera flashes. It was Vicky he had honed in on, despite his lawyer's protest. Pleased with your not guilty verdict, Quincy? Vale asked, her voice level, calm reporter tones. Oh, I'm guilty, Sharp spluttered, of maintaining order, punishing the guilty, weaning this thankless city off its reliance on vigilante justice. What about funneling weapons into Arkham City? Vale asked, an edge to her voice now. Weapons like the rocket launcher that killed my helicopter pilot and friend. Unthinkable, Sharp said, which is precisely why I was acquitted on that and all other charges. Your journalistic objectivity has been compromised by trauma, Miss Vale. Are you sure, Quincy? Vale asked, handing him a sheet of paper. Because it looks like your signature on this requisition order. Sharp froze. The cameras kept flashing. She should have said it in court, but it was her scoop after all. Scar tissue. Victor savored the familiar warmth of arterial blood splashing his face as he eased another of Penguin's lackeys into oblivion. He wiped the blade on his victim's biker jacket, then searched his own forearm for a clean plot of flesh amid the latest work of scars and fresh incisions. It had been an eventful night, and the blood loss was starting to drain Victor's energy. He planned to liberate just a handful of Penguin and Two-Face's men, leave the bodies in plain sight, and send a message to the Scarecrow who seemed determined to exclude him from his plans. but when he tallied the first victim, felt the knife's cold steel, Victor knew he wouldn't be satisfied until he felled a dozen or more. Sirens howled in the distance, and Zaz looked up to see the sky illuminated by the symbol of a bat. It seemed Scarecrow's Halloween festivities had already begun. Instinctively, Victor's fingers traced the smooth patch of skin he was saving especially for Batman. Let Scarecrow have his fun tonight, he thought. Batman would no doubt humiliate him and the others who followed his farcical plan. Then Zaz would find him. That patch of skin wouldn't be smooth for long.
If we don't find something soon, I'm punching you in the face.